If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high-quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
A warmer from below. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you as we're going to be joined in a few minutes by Ryan McIntyre. He does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. Taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. We're going to be talking a lot about a pair of conferences in the American and the Big 12 today. I personally think that South Florida has a good chance to be able to win that American. Our guy Ryan, he does a lot with West Virginia. He actually does a show that is dedicated to West Virginia athletics called the Ryan Rush Show. So we're going to be taking a look at that conference, how West Virginia might be setting themselves up for an NCAA tournament run. What can we expect out of Kansas this season, and so much more. So we've got a lot to dive in on with Ryan. We'll also talk about some of these coaches that were like NBA assistants, that were like game strategists at the NBA level, now coming down to the college basketball ranks, since we are coming off of what was a really good NBA finals as well. So we've got ourselves a lot of fun on this podcast, and every single time Ryan is bored, he does a great job. So we've got a lot to decipher today, and if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. And if you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters EM, name does not matter. So, per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And while I did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, everything is powered by EdgeBoost. EdgeBoost is making sure that bettors are able to access their funds whenever and wherever they want. 100% of gambling-related transactions are always approved. And when you go to edgeboost.bet, utilize that promo code of Greg, GREG. That'll get you a $1 match on your first deposit up to $25. Now let's chat with Ryan, who does such great work over at the College Experience over on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, where they take a look at a little bit more than just college basketball, but did a great job on the college baseball front, college football, what have you. And you're able to follow him on Twitter/X at Moneyline_Mac, spelled MAC. And Ryan, always great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Always appreciate it, Greg. Getting closer and closer to November.
We are inching our way there, and just how have you been taking a look at, in general, this offseason? Because I do think that this has been an offseason that has just been a little bit different in general from what we've seen in past offseasons, and I do think that this one is just one where it's taking a little bit more time to be able to make sort of our prognostications of these teams, just because so many guys entered in the transfer portal, and there's just so many different moving pieces in general to try to decipher.
It really has been. I think that we're finally getting closer and closer to more clarity on these rosters of the portal lists, although there still are more names than there probably should be, because maybe some guys shouldn't have transferred to start with. But for the most part, I think at the Power 4, Power 5 level, we have more clarity, especially with the NBA draft coming up this Wednesday.
Yep, I think so as well. And I think that those draft decisions were very big to be able to help decide, all right, what are we going to be all getting out of these teams? And I do think that when it comes to these teams trying to be able to fortify themselves, one team that has just been strange, and I want to get your thoughts here because we'll take a look at a lot of Big 12 teams in a minute, but they sort of lost out on a guy to the Big 12. That'd be Memphis, in that they no longer have PJ Haggerty in the fold, and it just feels like it's been a disaster for them over the last few seasons. Like, there are a lot of people that they wanted Josh Pastner out, but I don't see what Penny Hardaway has done that's much better than what Josh Pastner was able to do back when he was there back in the day, and it just feels like Memphis is a stagnant program that could be in for some disappointment this year.
I thought they did a good job for the most part last year, but, I mean, they lost a lot now. They've struggled to finish seasons. Losing in the NCAA tournament last year did not help. Getting upset by Colorado State. So Memphis is definitely going to be a work in progress. The thing that they have going for them is that the AAC probably will be down once again.
Yeah, with the American Conference, I actually look at South Florida as perhaps being the team to beat. Brian Hodgson, I think, has brought in a lot of really good guys in the transfer portal. I think that with South Florida, with the way that they've been able to build themselves up, I have all the confidence in the world that his coaching staff is going to be very rock solid. If I'm not mistaken, Tobin Anderson is coming over as one of the assistants as well. I think that they're really doing things right after what was just such a difficult situation for them last season.
Hodgson did a great job at Arkansas State. He's a Nate Oates guy, so he comes from that pedigree, which has been one of the more consistent NCAA programs in all the country in the SEC. So, yeah, Hodgson, they brought in talent so far early at South Florida. I thought he did a good job of upgrading the Arkansas State roster year after year with some of those transfers, and it seems like he's trying to duplicate it at South Florida at an even higher level now.
Yep, I agree with you. And I know that we're going to talk a little Big 12 here, but I do want to talk a little bit more about the American because you did mention it. You think that it's going to be a down conference? I think so as well. UAB losing Yaxel Lendeborg. I think that that's going to be rough. Always know that Andy Kennedy is going to do a solid job, but certainly I think it's going to be hard for them to duplicate what they've done in past years. And I don't know how you take a look at this conference, but I just feel like Tulane has a chance to be a rise up. Like, I've been disappointed by Tulane over the last few years. The biggest thing with them is it feels like they play a little bit too fast with not a lot of depth, but I do think that this could be one of these cases where this team is going to be able to rise up a little bit more. I think that this could finally be the breakthrough for this regime.
It needs to be because Ron Hunter has struggled with consistency since taking over. And so this is a big year. They've done a nice job in the portal. They will be old. So it does seem like Tulane should be set up for some nice success here in 24-25.
Yep, I'm right there with you. And I do think that for this bunch, I think that you're just going to be able to get a little bit more with Rome Brumbra coming back as well. So they're a program that I'm certainly looking at having a little bit of a tick up. As joining me on the show, we've got Ryan McIntyre. He does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. He's joining me on Coast to Coast Soups. And I know we've talked about this program a little bit, but we haven't in recent months because we've been taking a look at the NBA draft decisions, what have you, and those took center stage. And West Virginia, they really weren't involved in the NBA draft decisions. But you do the Ryan and Rush show as well, so you do a great job on the West Virginia front. Fortunately, you had some baseball to be able to talk about, to be able to pass the time as well. But that said, how do you take a look at the way that West Virginia has formed themselves? Because I thought that they were building momentum under DeVries and company. Obviously, they leave, but I feel like Russ Hodge has done a nice job coming in, and they made the best of what is a less than ideal situation, for lack of a better term.
I think Hodge is a good hire, good fit. They're going to be a defensive team once again, and he brings in identity. We saw Grant McCasland, his mentor, translate into success from North Florida and what's happened at Texas Tech. Ironically, McCasland seems to have been more up-tempo on the offensive side of the basketball, so I wonder if Hodge tries to duplicate that a little bit. But I think Hodge, for the most part, he's done a nice job bringing in multiple transfers from winning programs, whether it's Bonaventure, Wilmington. He's trying to establish his culture in year one like McCasland did, but I think he's done enough with some of these pieces in year number one that I think they can get to the NCAA tournament with how old they're going to be.
Yeah, and I think that is going to be really interesting because I think that some of those bids that went to the SEC, I don't think that they're going to be duplicating 13 bids to the NCAA tournament. I'm going to call it what it is. And I do think that some of these, shall we say, more mid-tier Big 12 teams are going to be interesting to look at as well, because I take a look at a team like West Virginia. I think that they're going to be pretty rock solid for this upcoming season. I do think that as well. Taking a look at a team like a BYU and what they've been able to do, certainly that's going to be big, and I think that they're going to be much better than mid-tier out there in the Big 12. But again, I take a look at someone like a perhaps TCU. I feel like they've got a little bit of a better blend, but I think the big question mark is Kansas State, because I think a lot of people think that they might be able to rise up this year, but I just don't know if I see it from them, even though they do add in there a guy in PJ Haggerty late in the process.
Yeah, and this is a big year for Tang. Year number 4, year 1 comes on the scene. They go to the Elite 8 with that magical team. But yeah, I mean, this is a big year. Haggerty comes in, but Haggerty's a ball-dominant guy. I guess they're going to try and play him at the 1, so we'll see how that goes. So yeah, definitely K-State is going to be kind of a mystery team in the Big 12, because I do like some of their individual talent, but like everything in this day and age of the portal, it all comes down to how do these guys mesh together with one another.
No question. And I do think that the biggest question in this conference, though, and I think that the smallest question is Houston. We all know that Houston is going to be pretty good. You bring back Milo Zuzan. You've got Kelvin Sampson. Signed, sealed, delivered that this team is going to be towards the top of the conference. If I see anything else, I'll let you guys know. But that said, Kansas. I mean, typically, you know what you're going to be able to get out of Kansas. You know what you're going to be able to get out of Bill Self. Is it just me, or has it been a really underwhelming offseason for them? We recall in the 2024 NCAA tournament, Bill Self said that he was already looking forward to 2024, 2025. That yielded a first-round exit in the NCAA tournament. It just feels like Kansas is right now in a little bit of a rut.
Hey, Greg, Kansas is such an intriguing situation because I do agree that on paper they do look underwhelming, but maybe they're better because they don't have as high profile guys and paying as much some of these guys. So maybe get in more under the radar and get some more guys with some chips on their shoulder coming in. The freshman Peterson's going to be special from everything. But yeah, everything that I can read, absolutely. I think Kansas will be better than people expect. They don't have all the hype coming into this year. And Hunter Dickinson, he's a good talent, but he has not had a track record of winning.
We are always a fan of anyone with the last name Peterson, so sign me up on the Darren Peterson hype train, but certainly going to be interesting because Melvin Council, he's been able to tear it up at mid-majors. Is he going to be able to take that step up to the Big 12? Jaden Dawson, is he going to as well? I think that that's a big question mark, and I mean, it's not just a question mark with Kansas, but I think it's one of the biggest things to be able to gauge in college basketball, and I do think that the one thing that Kansas has going for them is that these guys that are coming up for the mid-major ranks, they're guards rather than big men, because I just always take a look at the big men that come up from the mid-major ranks. Certainly we saw a guy from Auburn and Jedi Broom be able to do it, but I feel like those guys are very few and far between. Whereas these like jump shooters, these guys that are just sort of jitterbug guys, like perhaps a Melvin Council who stuffs the stat sheet, I feel like they're more likely to have success rather than someone down low.
Makes sense because making shots translates at all level. Back to more size and physicality. I think that just is what bothers some of these mid-major bigs that try to transfer up from a mid-major league into a Big 12, SEC, or Big East. I think just the physicality and the size really bothers them. So that's why I think that you have more success with the guards, just because I think that it translates more.
No question about it, as we do have one of our good friends, and Ryan McIntyre, who does amazing work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And in the wake of the NBA Finals, I do want to dive in a little bit on this as well, because I want to bring up BYU. As we saw under Coach Young last season, they looked to the NBA ranks to be able to bring him in. They had great success. Could this be a little bit more of a trend in college basketball, especially coming off of what was a tremendous NBA Finals? Can we see a little bit more there? We're going to talk a little bit about Utah. We're going to talk about Arizona State and how they've been so strange, and a few teams that our guy Ryan McIntyre is feeling a little bit bullish on. We're going to do that on the flip side right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Beast and Family Podcast.
If your job at a healthcare facility includes disinfecting against viruses, you know prevention is the best medicine, and maintaining healthy spaces starts with a healthy cleaning routine. Grainger's world-class supply chain helps ensure you have the quality products you need when you need them, from disinfectants and cleaning supplies to personal protective equipment, so you can help deliver a clean bill of health. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
And we're back here, lovely Las Vegas, for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the Beast and Family Podcast. Great to be rejoined by Ryan McIntyre, who does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, deciphering that great game that we all know and love of college basketball, and he does a great job all 12 months out of the year, along with our good friend Kobe Dant over there at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. You can follow my Twitter /X at Moneyline_Mac. And we left off by talking about just a little bit about the Big 12, the American, what have you. But I want to dive in on something a little bit deeper, because we are coming off of what was a tremendous NBA Finals. And we've seen a few teams decide to go to the NBA. And one team in particular was able to have great success with it last season out there in the Big 12. BYU, they've got just bags upon bags of money out there in the great state of Utah. AJ DePanza, many people think that he might be the number one overall pick in next year's draft. He comes in, they pay a bunch of money for Robert Wright. I would say a little bit of an overpay, but they're certainly going to get production out of him. And then they return some of these guys like Dawson Baker, Richie Saunders, Kabakita. And I look at this team, and I even think that Milo Boskovic, the international gentleman that came in from last year, and I just see a really deep team that could really be able to take off in year number 2 under this coaching staff that we know they've got the roots from the OKC Thunder, and we saw what they were able to do a few nights ago.
Yeah, and Kevin Young did a great job year number 1, mate, and he continued the momentum from Mark Pope and company. So I'm with you. BYU, bags of cash, that does help. And you see some of these guys now trying to duplicate it with NBA assistants because of Kevin Young's success. I hope they have the same payroll that BYU does, but bringing in those transfers and obviously AJ coming in as a talented freshman, I'm looking forward to seeing how they mesh together. The transfer from Baylor, the guard, he did a great job this last year, I thought, in his freshman year with the Baylor Bears, and I think that he was overshadowed by some of the other guys. A bunch of talent here with the BYU Cougs, and they probably should be a preseason top 5 team, honestly.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. If you don't have them in the top 5, certainly a top 8 spot. I do think that there's a lot of potential there. And I think that you mentioned something so interesting as well. With a lot of teams now looking to these NBA guys with the success of Kevin Young last year, we're certainly seeing with Iona, Florida State. Zach Chu over at Radford, I think is so interesting as well, because I was talking about the OKC Thunder just a minute ago. He was part of that Indiana Pacers staff for a few years as well. And I think that it's going to be a big year for these guys, because if someone like a Zach Chu breaks through, if Florida State surprises in the ACC, I think that we might see a lot more of this. Whereas if these guys fail, I think that they might just decide, oh, maybe this was just a one and done situation.
And I kind of think it is more of a one and done situation. Like I said, with the BYU situation, I think that's more of just payroll, the investment that they have for the tradition at BYU as well. But I'm looking forward to seeing how it plays out. Plenty of guys getting opportunities. Mentioned it, Florida State, Utah, Radford. It definitely is going to be an intriguing headline, because if it does work, we know how everything is. Everything's a copycat league. You'll see more and more of it.
Yep, I think that is going to be one of the biggest case studies of this entire college basketball season, as our good friend Ryan McIntyre, who does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, and that's certainly something that I want to see moving forward. And you did mention the fact that Utah is going to be another one of those teams that's going to be interesting, and that's staying out there in the same state of BYU. And I like Craig Smith as a coach. It just never really happened for him. But how do you see things playing out for the Utes, a team that many people think is going to be a little bit further down there in this conference? And it's a little bit of a new look bunch that I feel like they bring in some solid players, but I think that they perhaps went a little bit too far into the mid-major ranks, and they could use a little bit more guys that, for lack of a better term, have a bit more experience at the power level.
Nothing irritates the Utes fans more than watching BYU have success. So they went out. Now they're trying to duplicate this NBA model. I think that they'll be a team that can make shots from the perimeter again. I do question their level of toughness in the Big 12 night in and night out, if they have enough on that end. And like you said, his first-year head coach trying to go through the gauntlet. He'll have his challenges for sure.
And then I do have to address this team, because I just don't know what's happening with this team in general. And I have no idea how Bobby Hurley still has a still has a job over at Arizona State. Like, I thought he was on the hot seat probably like 4 or so years ago. I guess the folks over at Arizona State love being able to vacation in Dayton once every about 3 to 4 years, because that's all they've gotten right now to Bobby Hurley. And I don't know how you've been gauging this, because you do such a great job of being able to take a look at things in the Big 12. It just feels like things have went further and further backwards for Bobby Hurley. And yet the folks over there in Tempe are more and more satisfied with more and more mediocrity / bad play.
I think they're just happy to be good in football right now with the run they had last year. Yeah, they've been such a weird team over the last couple of years, because they'll pop up and knock off.
Like, the guard play in the first few years for Arizona State was good, and it's gotten progressively worse.
I just question the commitment on the NIL front in regards to basketball, and I think that's why we've seen a decrease in the level of talent, and I think that's why you've seen other guys go elsewhere from Arizona State and have success. We'll see how Quentin studs at Kentucky this year, but yeah, Arizona State, I'm not high on them this year. They're usually talented, but they lack consistency, and that's been the Bobby Hurley era in a nutshell.
And I think that this leads into something else as well, because I was thinking about this when we were talking about the former NBA guys that had slipped my mind, but we're talking about a former player in Bobby Hurley. How do you take a look at some of these guys that are former players that are now taking over programs? Because I think that Mike Bibby is so interesting. I wasn't feeling great about that hire until you got Shaquille O'Neal as the GM, and Shaquille O'Neal has been doing a pretty good job as the GM. So shout out to Shaq right there, bringing in his son. So that's been great. Charlie Ward, I think, is so interesting over at Florida A&M as well. And I think that those are going to be two really interesting case studies, because we've seen some of these former players just really fizzle. But a guy that's sort of been around the block, Reggie Theus, I actually think that he's had low-key one of the better off seasons in all of college basketball over at Bethune-Cookman.
Well, I think it's a can't-lose situation if you're one of these mid-majors like a Sac State or a FAMU. And we're seeing it with football too, with Norfolk and Delaware State hiring Michael Vick and Sean Jackson. So it helps with NIL, and it helps kind of jolt a little bit of energy into your program, see if you can get some more national recognition. But I think the biggest thing for those guys that lack coaching experience is, can they hire an experienced guy on their staff that can help with the X's and O's, the practice game planning? Because in the end, I think that those guys are more kind of just a face and kind of a GM, even though they do have the head coaching title. But I think it's more of just their brand that can help lift these programs up.
Yep, and I do think that that's what really makes a lot of these programs as well, because when you have a trusted assistant and a trusted associate coach, typically things go really well. Like even for Juwan Howard in the beginning for Michigan, things went really well because he had a Phil Martelli there. Obviously, it went sour after the first few years, but I think that that is so good. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. And then I want to open this up to you a little bit, Ryan, because we've talked about a few specific situations. We've talked about a few specific teams, but has there been a team over the last perhaps month or so that you just take a look at them, and the more and more you look at them, the more and more you just like them for the upcoming college basketball season?
Well, Houston would be easy to sell with all that returning production, but I'll go to the other team that was really, really good in the Big 12 last year and got to the Elite Eight, and honestly probably should have been in the Final Four. They should have beat Florida. They blew that game, but they get JT Toppin back. I like what Texas Tech is bringing back, and I think once again they've done a good job in the portal. I think McCaslin gets it. They're really invested over there at Texas Tech. I know they lose Darian Williams, but I think some of the guys that they brought in are going to be able to really help. And I think they're just good fits for what McCaslin wants to do. So I would say Texas Tech will be a preseason top 10 team once again for me.
Yep, with Texas Tech, they are able to really do it on both sides of the ball. I'm interested to see what the tempo is going to be, because for the first few years of Grant McCaslin, not quite what it was over at North Texas. He's been a little bit more of a mid-tempo guy, and what are you sort of expecting on that front as well? Because I do think that that's a little bit of an interesting question to see if Grant McCaslin just really takes what he's done this last year or two over at Texas Tech, or if he decides, you know what, I'm going to go a little bit back to my style a little bit more now they've got a bit more of a foothold here in the Big 12.
That goes back to what I said about Ross Hodge at West Virginia, is the flexibility that McCaslin's been able to display in his young coaching career has been incredible. I mean, he played at a snail's pace at North Texas, then he played faster. He's won games at North Texas in the tournament, beat Purdue. Then last year he goes to the Elite Eight. I think it's kind of a mix. I think maybe they probably go a little bit slower, maybe not as slow as Houston, but I think that they will play more of a slower tempo. So you can expect a lot of games in the 60s, a lot of rock fights. But, I mean, hey, it's a Big 12. It's always a rock fight.
Yep, it certainly is. In the Big 12, you never know what you're going to be able to get on that front. Texas is going to be really interesting with Sean Miller. And I tell you right now, that's probably not a program that's going to be slowing down. And a man that never slows down is you, Ryan. You do such great work taking a look at this great game of college basketball, but really a little bit of everything. I know that you and Kobe Dan were doing a great job being able to gauge the College Baseball World Series. I know that you guys are starting up your college football previews as well over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network on the College Experience. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yes, sir. Always appreciate it, Greg. Yeah, go find us out at the College Experience. All 136 team previews, and then we will begin our fall coaches tour as well, where we'll have some of the head coaches of these programs that we talk about. So talking it all year long. Appreciate it, Greg.
Yep, and Ryan, he's one of the best in the business, stays so consistent on that grind, and he is very much appreciated. A big thanks to Ryan for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we'll fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @GUnit_81. Keep in mind, letters the name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I'm coming at you guys every single day on this podcast, regular season and off season. So I will be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.
For the ones who get it done, the most important part is the one you need now. And the best partner is the one who can deliver. That's why millions of maintenance and repair pros trust Grainger, Because we have professional-grade supplies for every industry, even hard-to-find products. And we have same-day pickup and next-day delivery on most orders. But most importantly, we have an unwavering commitment to help keep you up and running. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.